but there's always the blame game in these moments, and there's certainly an attempt to play a blame game, and so the Metropolitan Police, were put in the crosshairs, and we had all kinds of things. Oh, we need to get rid of Cressida Dick. Why hasn't she resigned? Priti Patel. Well, let's do a demarcation there, because we talk about the police. We're going to talk about the politicians in a moment, Rebecca. We're going to get to the politicians, because I think that's a significant area that does need discussion. But as far as I can see, the police have done nothing wrong in this at all. They've apprehended the alleged culprit pretty quickly, and that's kind of the end of it. I don't see what more that we can. I mean, I've got issues with the police now, but we need to talk about them in a political context, not in a necessarily policing context. So there's that. But I just don't see how the police are responsible in general for the actions of one individual. You can't run that argument, surely.
Well, in that case, every doctor is at risk to their patient. Every nurse is at risk to their patient. Every teacher is a potential sex offender. Everything is possible. Again, nothing is 100% safe. But the big issue here is that when you do promote things on clickbait, and you've got the mainstream media feeding on almost competition with Twitter and Facebook on these events, because now Twitter by far outweighs the mainstream media in terms of broadcasting live events. They need clickbait, and so they're manufacturing and confecting a problem where intellectually, if you were really worried about people's lives, because all lives are equal, if you were really bothered about people's lives, you would be asking Sadiq Khan why black on black knife crime is so high, which is where I started on this.
That's right. Yeah.
And one pretty girl's life is not worth more than a not so pretty girl or a not so pretty boy. She was beautiful, yes, but so what? She was a human being.
Right.
Madeleine Khan was a beautiful 2-year-old. Yes, so what if she'd been pug ugly? Why does the media pick up these tropes of emotion when you should look at hard facts and say, why is policing in London so poor? I can tell you why policing is so poor is because they have been recruiting graduates on fast track training schemes into the DCIs, recruiting them into CID, meant to have mentoring. They get no mentoring. They NFA cases left, right, and centre, and high risk individuals like this guy potentially slip through the net. And that is because their police and crime commissioner has been a short-ass little git who's prepared to stand up and look at statues and bring down colonial links to slavery and, to point fingers and join the BLM movement rather than deal with the bigger policing issues. And Cressida Dick has got that dickhead as the police and crime commissioner. She's also got a parliament producing legislation right now that bans protests, that bans public gathering because of the coronavirus pandemic. So what is she meant to do? Is she meant to follow the law as made by the lawmakers, or listen to Mr. Sit on the Fence Sadiq Khan, who gave no guidance at all? What's she meant to do?
Well, I did see a clip, Rebecca, a couple of years ago, I think maybe 1 to 2 years ago, of Sadiq Khan claiming he was a feminist mayor. He was a feminist mayor. He was there to advance the feminist cause. And as you say, he's presided over London becoming a very violent city in certain areas in particular, and the murder rate, as we all know, is gone, or at least had been going up through the roof up until the pandemic. I suppose that may have ameliorated it a bit. But you're right. It doesn't matter. All human life's equal. It doesn't matter if they're young, old, pretty, on track, it doesn't matter. The loss of a life is the loss of a life. And you're dead right, Rebecca. The amount of young black men in particular who have lost their lives in London at the hands of gangs, many of which are black gangs as well. It's a matter of fact. Can't get me this one. It's just a matter of observable fact. Metropolitan Police said it. It's sad. It's sad. But they did nothing about that instead. And now this happens, and he virtue signals like mad. And again, the net result is, though, London will still be a very violent place for reasons which we could discuss at another time. But he hasn't dealt with that, you know. And yes, Dick can. So I don't actually blame Crusader Dick at all in this scenario.
Another point I'd like to raise is the fact that, again, I don't want to raise race all the time here, but I have said black on black crime is the biggest cause of death in London. I'd like to raise another crime against women, because I do think this is important, and I would like to see what the stream says about this. Is that when a Muslim girl is murdered by her family for, say, marrying out of the Muslim faith, marrying a white boy or a Hindu boy or whatever, that murder is called an honor killing. It's not called a murder, it's called an honor killing. We find a whole separate form of words to prevent us from having to say, this is a racially based offence where a culture clash exists in the UK effectively. There goes David, I'll just keep going. We have a culture clash in Britain where Muslims cannot marry out of their faith, and therefore you end up in a situation where their family kills a daughter. Now that's called an honor killing. It shouldn't be called an honor killing. It should simply be called a murder. But this is because politicians are effectively cowards and haven't got the guts to call things as they are, which, as somebody put up on the stream earlier, and I do think it was Jed, who said, you know, why do we have grooming gangs? Is because we haven't got the guts to turn around and say there is a cultural link to this. So I don't want to make the Sarah Everard a statement on race, but the words around what type of offence we view differently it's impossible to judge where politicians stand on a moral and ethical point of view when it comes to loss of a life.
Right. Well, I'm back in the room, and Rebecca has the great talent to be able to improvise when I vanish off, owing to my Stone Age broadband. But there we go. Thanks, Rebecca, for holding the fort in your normally in sort of inestimable way. Yeah. So what I was going to say was, though, right, on the politicians, so on the political aspects of this, they're all falling over each other now to say, oh, well, we need to think about this, we need to look at that. Some of them have criticised the police for the heavy-handed policing, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the politicians who put in place the COVID regs, which the police were implementing at Clapham Common, for example. And so I didn't see them complaining when the lockdown. The lockdown skeptics are similarly, arrested and in some instances actually attacked. I've seen evidence of
a 52-year-old woman who was punched by the police officer.
Yeah. And by the same token, this is where it's so mad, though, Rebecca. We all seen and have it sort of indelibly sort of branded into our memory the Met running away from BLM officers along the side of Parliament there last summer. So we have different police reactions, and as far as I'm concerned, there's only one law. It should be enforced for what it's worth, be it right or wrong. It's the law. It should be, or the regs. They should be enforced. There's been an inconsistency there now, which I put it to you, is problematical, but it wasn't problematical for these hysterical feminist protesters when it was other groups getting the rough treatment. But when it's them, it's a different case. I just think that makes them complete hypocrites.
I am beginning to wonder who all these protesters are, because, a little bit of me thought, would I go up to that vigil? I probably would have done. If it hadn't been a pandemic, I possibly would have done. But, you know, do we have a professional class of protesters?
Yeah, I think we do.
I think, you know, if you look at the police reports, excuse me, there was a lot of kicking, spitting at police again, which is
Right.
now, why should police put up with being spat at?
No reason.
They should not have to put up with that.
No.
You know, and so if somebody did that to me, I'd frickin' well punch them and put them on the ground. I can tell you, I would not tolerate that as a police officer. And particularly with the virus circulating, admittedly not at great levels, but, you know, still, we are still under regulations. So, you know, absolutely, I agree with you. And I just, no criticism of Cressida Dick. What we have got, though, is an election in 7 weeks' time. And because they are so devoid of policy, so devoid of optics, bearing in mind these are local elections, we've got Labour weaponising the 1% pay rise for nurses. And now we've got Ed Davey weaponising against Cressida Dick. Ironic that they are weaponising against a female officer, female head of the Met, who's the first ever, and claiming all sorts of feminist agendas over it. But he called for her resignation over the policing of it. But, you know, there was a High Court ruling that refused to give a ruling on it. What were the police meant to do? You know what? It was an optic disaster, but did the police do anything wrong? Probably not. But what are the opposition politicians? They're scrabbling. They don't know what agenda to run for the local elections, bearing in mind that, you know, policing and NHS pay has got nothing to do with local politics at all. It's bins and roads. And education, you know, if you're at county level. So they're just scrabbling around to find any gravy train to jump on.
And in doing so, cynically exploiting the death of Sarah Everard for their own pathetic little political atavistic agenda. I think it's appalling. You know, I do think on the, you know, when it came to the police, I thought so much about this. You know, when it did look bad, but then I think perhaps the optics were never going to be good because, you know, so a woman is murdered, other women gather, I believe so they all gather, and so it's a difficult one. But if you've got COVID regs in place, you've got COVID regs in place. You can't pick and choose. Police can, or they mustn't pick and choose. You can't have two sets of law. So I think all they did was what they had to do. And of course, I personally, I mean, we may disagree in this, because I oppose and have consistently opposed COVID regs, as you know. I believe the right of protest is essential in a democracy. And you could always argue, well, maybe there's ways to do it given the pandemic, or, you know, the alleged pandemic and all that. But there's things about that you could look at. But so I do believe that people should have the right to protest, but that should be the right for everybody then. It's not just for these particular individuals. So I just think their lack of self-awareness, Rebecca, just on that base level alone, is cosmic. It's absolutely cosmically self-unaware. But
well, you can't have politicians, in my opinion, who have aspirations for being in power. You can't have them opposed to the police. And when you get Sadiq Khan, who is even closer because he's the Police and Crime Commissioner for London, what the hell is he doing criticising his own police force? Because he didn't make a statement either way. So this is opportunistic politicking, and it makes me sick because, as you say, you're weaponising a tragedy. And we're now getting all these confusing discussions which don't go anywhere about crime stats and CPS prosecutions for rape offences. It's irrelevant. It is totally irrelevant to the argument. The failure, or the perceived failure, to proceed on rape prosecutions has got nothing to do with the streets being safe, because I can assure everybody on the stream, having been there, the vast majority of rapes which are pursued through the courts now are consent based. It's not a blind alley with a knife, because if somebody rapes you at knife point and there's sexual intercourse and there's evidence, there's semen, there's forensic evidence, that person gets banged up really, really quickly. Those are not the cases that go to court. The classic rape case now is the date rape case. The girl turns around in the morning and says, oops, have I had sex? I didn't consent. I was too drunk to consent. And that is not necessarily a violent offence against a woman. It's not a woman being dragged off a London street at 9 o'clock in the evening.
No.
These are going out to a club and both getting completely hammered. And, I don't believe they should be charged as rape at all. I think, if anything, there should be sexual assaults, because juries won't convict in those circumstances, despite numerous governments trying to change the rules on rape and what the evidential rules are. Juries are not having it. So, I don't like conflating criminal behavior with the general position of women in society. And, I've experienced this myself recently in the political sphere, is that women are treated badly. They are treated badly by men. In the workplace, a lot of women treat women really badly in the workplace, particularly women returning after having babies. The worst thing is a bloody menopausal 50-year-old managing you if you've just come back after a baby. God help you. The workplace isn't particularly well fitted out for women. But again, reclaiming the streets and locking men up after 6 p.m. sounds good, doesn't it? It's not the solution to those problems.
No, but I'll tell you what I think is really interesting. Although we don't want this to be about gender, I agree with just about everything you've just said there, actually, throughout the stream. But somehow or another, I don't know what the stream thinks about this, but Rebecca, I don't see too many male, or actually female politicians for that matter, so it's probably across the board, saying the things that you've just said, which are eminently sensible, truthful, and based on observable fact. But instead, the majority of the political class in this past number of days are falling over themselves to fawn and to pander and to do anything but actually just speak the sort of truth that you've just spoken. Because I believe in absolute truth. I don't believe in you've spoken your truth. It's truthful or it's not. It's a fact or it's not. I've had enough of the Meghan Markle. I've spoken my truth to you. No, you've told me what you think. That's fine. Here's your opinion. That's all it is. It's not a truth.
My lived experience.
My lived experience. But the point is, I mean, your lived experience, Rebecca, I think resonates with a lot of people on the stream here, from what I can see, and a lot of people will watch this. But it's not necessarily a view that I've really heard much in the past several days since this.
No, and actually on one of the Facebook groups up in Winchester, I posted on today, and I said, can we just remember that the current crop of young men, and I'm talking about, my son's age, so in their early 20s now, they are massively different to the men I was dealing with when I was his age, because they are more respectful of women. They do respect equality. They do expect equality in the workplace. They're not constantly on about women's appearances. And so that sort of, I know we brand them as the snowflakes and the woke generation. Actually, they are very alive to the issues, because it's our generation who's parented that generation. And, things evolve slowly, maybe too slowly for some people, but it doesn't really matter as long as they get there. Things have changed dramatically. 60% of all medical school recruits now are girls. So much so that there's a potential crisis when they all have babies. But put that aside, equality at school, equality in the workplace, disrespecting people's, spaces at work and not pinching people's tits and bums and all of that has gone in the workplace. And it's as parents, we have taught our children to be good citizens.
Well, that's right.
I think we should congratulate that, and we should recognize that things are a lot better. And as politicians, we shouldn't jump on the bandwagon and just start pointing fingers all the time, because that doesn't help anything. And by the way, it doesn't buy you votes either, because the electorate can see straight through it, which is why I refuse to jump on these bandwagons. And I just say, well, what are the facts here? What is the real truth? Let's look at it in perspective and be rational when we see a murder or a rape or an abduction of a child. It's as rare as 10 teeth, and we should treat it that way.
It's as Graham says in the stream here, essentially it is media bandwagon jumping. And we saw it with the murder of George Floyd, or the killing of George Floyd, the BLM. We continually see this. The media jumps on something, and there's not enough brave politicians to stand up and argue in the eloquent way that you just have, Rebecca. You're not really, and the other thing is, by the way, when they say hashtag reclaim the streets, I just wanted to put this out here. Twitter's never going to solve anything. Hashtag campaigns, as we saw for many years when we had all kinds of terrorist events around the UK and elsewhere, a hashtag campaign never changed anything. It maybe made some people felt good. It maybe allows a bit of narcissism, but beyond that, it doesn't achieve anything. But Rebecca, reclaim the streets from whom? Who is on the streets that they need to be reclaimed from? These people? Tell me.
I know. Who exactly? And who are you going to call if you have a problem?
Yeah.
Dial 999, and it won't be the police. This is a competition between the media channels, and at the moment, Twitter and Facebook are winning the battle. So, as I said to you earlier today, I'll share it with the stream. I was asked to appear on a television program for an interview tonight to talk about the nurses' pay rise, and they asked me a series of questions beforehand. And I said, well, no, it's going to be £500 million at 1%. Nurses have always said they're not paid enough. Donna Kinnear is a left-wing loony running the Royal College of Nursing. No. And nurses are not going to leave their jobs because of it, because there aren't any jobs to go to. So be glad you've got a pay rise, because some people haven't even got a job to go back to. And by the way, if I was a nurse, a nursing leader now, I would be saying, I will renounce my 1% pay rise, because the nation needs money spent on healthcare, not healthcare workers. We need waiting lists to be reduced. We need cancer screening to be trebled in order to do a big catch up. All these things where money ought to go. Money's tight. No, it shouldn't go into staff pockets. Absolutely not. And the program got back to me and said, sorry, we don't really want that narrative. That's not what we're looking for. So that's the power of media.
It is.
It's an editorial line.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I experienced myself over many years where they bring you on to say something which they have predetermined you will say. And if, as in what happened today, Rebecca, you put forward your own views, which are absolutely fine, but they're not the views they want to hear, then you don't get on. And politicians, they are prepared to play the game. They will say exactly that which the media want them to say. And I've always said, well, who elected the media to tell anyone what to say? And that's one of the reasons I'm never on it, Rebecca, because I won't, I have no intention of playing the game. But nonetheless, I think it does explain what you said. That experience you had today, it does explain why, even Boris was groveling today. We want women to feel safe. Oh, please, Boris, do me a favor. It is. It really is. It's so thin deep there's no sincerity behind it, whatsoever.
The Conservative Party is having a real struggle with me at the moment. It just doesn't know which box to put me in, because they want to put me up for election because I've got the right optics, but they don't like what I say, and so they're really really struggling. But they do need my seat. So, and I find it, I just think, why are you guys so stupid? Why do you care what the mainstream media thinks? You have to say the right thing.
Yeah.
Or you have to be true to yourself. To thine own self be true. Because you're never going to get caught out as a politician if you just speak from the heart and you're honest about what your views are. Why do you have to form a homogenous gloop in the middle and be completely without personality and be completely without principle? You're only borrowing off other people all the time if you don't stand up and say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. But you're expected to agree. And then when a identity issue comes up, you're expected to agree with that as well. And all of the appeal to logic, well, we'll just lift the carpet and sweep that under, because that people don't want to hear that. So it doesn't make us look good. Like, come on.
But you're right. It's an appeal to emotion based on nothing other than just emotion. And whilst there's nothing wrong with emotion as such, it's not the sole criteria that you should use in coming to a decision. I earlier on today, I did a thing last week, Rebecca, on Sharon Oz. This was in the context of the Piers Morgan malarkey. And
so I'm just smiling because our Philly man has just called me Rebecca Trump.
Rebecca Trump. Well, you see, City Troll. We have that's why Rebecca is such a regular feature here.
I know, in the Bethlehem Steelworks, that's where I cut my teeth.
But that's thrown me off my line of thought, and I don't know what I was going to say.
Sorry.
But the thing is that you have to have some. Yeah, I supported Sharon Osbourne last week when she asked somebody on a TV show that she presents, have you any facts that would demonstrate Piers Morgan was racist? And the answer back came there, none. 2 days later, she apologized on social media for asking the question. And then I read today the show has been dropped from the news cycle. And that's the way they do it, Rebecca. If you don't conform, then things happen. So in the media as well, they're all controlled to think in the one direction, and politicians are controlled to genuflect to that. I think it's all very unhealthy, because I think good arguments stand up and bad arguments. Well, it's from your legal background, Rebecca. And it's the same in business. A well-constructed argument has a very good chance of success. A poorly constructed one will fail. If it's just based on emotion, it's not even an argument, is it? And so these protesters at Clapham Common, they have no argument. All they've got is kind of febrile emotion.
Well, they have the word spaghetti as well, all the resonant words. And I know this is a little bit of a segue, but when somebody called me Trump there, something that did really strike me, and I know we do have some US viewers on this, and it is really worth saying that Trump is credited with getting the coronavirus pandemic wrong and is somehow personally to blame for America having a death rate less than a lot of other countries on the planet. But he's nevertheless to blame for every single death. And I'm saying that with a huge lump of sarcasm. Trump is the only leader on the planet who said, shut the borders, stop the flights coming in. If we had done that, we would not have had the death rate we did. Trump would have overseen a far higher death rate in the States if he hadn't shut all the flights from China. Now, because Trump did it, it was tainted, because Trump bad, everybody else good. So if I don't align myself with Trump, I'm in the clear. If Boris had done what Trump did, he would have been in a lot of trouble with our media, not with the electorate, because the electorate was saying, hang on a minute, they're still flying in from Wuhan. New Zealand shut the borders, Australia shut the borders, the US shut the borders. Actually, okay, New Zealand and Australia have done exceptionally well. America hasn't done badly in the coronavirus death state, actually. And another thing Trump did brilliantly was Operation Warp Speed. Where is the credit for Trump right now? I mean, Boris is getting all the credit for doing exactly the same as Trump, the no regrets vaccination policy. It's worked brilliantly. Trump did exactly the same. He put $20 billion of taxpayers' money straight into the vaccine effort, and they came good. I mean, America, 25% of the population's vaccinated. That is a fantastic result. Trump doesn't get the credit because Trump is damaged goods. So nothing that comes out of Trump's mouth can be good.
Yeah,
and this is the problem.
Yeah, Trump is orange man bad, Rebecca. It's as simple as that. Orange man bad. Just facts are relevant. Orange man is bad. I mean, there's a few other comments here. Just wanted to just bring up before we come to an end. I'm sure would agree with this, Rebecca. Jim says most politicians being churned out, or at least many, are coming from left-wing unis with very little life experience. I think that's what someone like you, Rebecca, adds enormously. You've got to have life experience. I mean, you don't get that. Experience is not something you instantly get. You acquire it over a period of time, you know. So I think, Jim, that's a very fair point you make. I see some other comments here. Just quickly scanning them. I agree about the borders, by the way, Rebecca. We should have closed. Again, once we don't agree in some other aspects of this, we should have closed the borders day one. Actually, by then it was maybe even too late, but it would have been better to have done it than not to have done it, which is why the current, I don't even get that. I don't understand what's happening as regards to that. But look, folks, I think that's about it. We've exceeded our hour, but I've kept us more or less on track despite not being here for some of it. So I think like this whole sad weaponization of Sarah Everard's very tragic murder, it makes me sad, Rebecca, more than angry, I suppose. But I don't think the stuff that we're seeing on our screens will achieve anything. It just allows some people to virtue signal, emote, break COVID regs, even though they want them to be enforced for others. And it's a bit sad. And I wish that more political figures were like yourself and were strong enough to point out, that so much is being conflated into this that it's no longer a meaningful discussion. But that said, we've had a meaningful discussion on it, so at least we can congratulate ourselves on that. So, Rebecca, without further ado, thank you for being in this. I didn't see Skipper in the background, by the way. He was extremely well behaved. If he's still hiding behind there on the other side of
he's not there. He hasn't emerged.
Right, so well done, Skipper, on another good appearance here. And well done you, Rebecca, for joining Skipper on the stream. And thanks, everybody, for being part of this. It's always good to have these streams. I am back tomorrow night, by the way. Join me at 8 o'clock. We're going to have a live stream with a local person from Northern Ireland who's been on the stream before with me, David McCullum. So we look forward to that discussion. So much, Rebecca, we could have talked about. We could have talked about AstraZeneca. We could have talked about loads of stuff, but as always, I think it was good to stick to one topic, to be honest. I think
it was an important one. Yeah,
it is. It is, and there were so many good aspects to it. So thank you all, folks. Good night. That's it from me.
And that's it from me. Good night, everybody, and thank you so much for all your comments. It's been brilliant.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Q.